It sounds like you were interviewed a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, I'd say it will be 3 weeks tomorrow.
3 weeks. We were given notice just late last week from the government, and here you are today, with Parliament perhaps closing tomorrow. For such an important, as you would agree, an important position to hire for, this is not. It may be expeditious, but it is not satisfactory to opposition, as you could probably imagine, because a single name on a letter is not consultation by anybody's definition that I know. A question for you. You may have said it in your own opening comments, but it's perhaps more of a, no, it's not philosophical, it's legal. Who do you believe that the position of the Ethics Commissioner works for?
Parliament, clearly, House of Commons.
The concern, and you addressed this, I thought you might take the opportunity to address it in your opening comments, is that Mr. Ferguson's audit came in 2014. You'd been the Commissioner for Public Sector Integrity for how long by that point?
The report was tabled on April 15, 2014, so it would have been 3 years after I came to the office. So
the previous Commissioner had some serious problems, left in, it's not for your comment, but it's generally understood to left in some disgrace. The department was falling apart. It was, as you say, a scathing previous report from the Auditor General. And I'm quoting from the AG's report. The lack of oversight by PSIC senior managers amounted to gross mismanagement. Do you agree with that finding?
Yes, the expression gross mismanagement is one that's defined in the Act, and his view was that it did constitute gross mismanagement. I don't necessarily agree with his decision that it fits the definition.
Sorry, you don't agree with the assessment from the Auditor General?
Because gross mismanagement, it's again, most statutes leave room for interpretations, but it doesn't matter what I think. The Auditor General made the decision that it befit the definition, and I respect that.
But you don't agree with it?
I don't. I still don't.
Okay.
And I didn't at the time, and I told him so.
I'm also quoting, on the basis of the information gathered during this investigation, we concluded that the Commissioner committed wrongdoings as defined by subsections 8A and C of the Public Servants Disclosure Protection Act. Do you agree with that finding?
Yes.
So delaying a decision, ensuring that the PSIC managers understood and followed through on their responsibilities, and not having a process in place to manage declared conflicts of interest. That last part I want to underline a little bit. Not having a process in place to manage declared conflicts of interest. You're applying to be the Conflict of Interest Commissioner.
At the time, the PSIC, the office, did not have a written policy on conflicts of interest.
This is 3 years after you had taken the job?
Correct.
Still no written...
It's not really 3 years, because the report was tabled in April, but it took them a year to conduct the investigation. So it describes matters that arose a year before that.
Yeah. Okay, but you'd been in the position. I'm just doing the sequence of time to understand. I know AG reports sometimes cast further back, but this AG report and this particular criticism of not having that policy written down on conflict of interest was at least for the 2 years, if not 3 years, but 2 years for certain under your watch.
We did not have a policy.
Okay. You said earlier that
although the general policies, of course, applicable to the public sector were there and did exist.
In earlier response to a question about continuing the investigations, you were not definitive. You said essentially, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but you wanted to look at the evidence that Ms. Dawson had accumulated on the investigations under which Mr. Morneau, the Finance Minister, and Mr. Trudeau, the Prime Minister, are currently under right now. Is that
I think it's my responsibility, if I was appointed as the new commissioner, to review the whole situation.
Ms. Dawson and others have argued that the Act needs to be fixed to not leave it to the discretion of a new appointee coming in, that like a court would, as you know, as a jurist, any judge coming in midway through a case would be committed to following through on the case. Yet for this commissioner, you have the discretion. It's in your power, and you're not willing to commit to following through on these investigations. Do you think the Act needs to be fixed to ensure that investigations continue regardless?
I frankly don't have a view at this point in time, because I have not studied in depth, everything that has to do with the Act, and I know that Commissioner Dawson has made several recommendations for amendments.
So no opinion on this continuation. Nope. Let me ask you another recommendation Ms. Dawson has made, because you're applying to be her replacement. She has suggested that the conflict of interest to be expanded to include entities, so-called numbered companies, that can receive benefit from a member but don't fall under the Act because they exist as a quote-unquote entity under Canadian law, even though all the benefits might flow to that member. Do you agree with that recommendation?
You know, based on my knowledge of Mrs. Dawson, I would agree with prima facie with the recommendation because she's very reflective. So she made that recommendation. It most probably makes sense. However, I would like to see the foundation upon which it was based.
So a conditional yes.
Yes.
Let me ask you a scenario, conflict of interest. I've got 7 minutes to decide whether we should hire you or not. It's a strange scenario. When I'm hiring somebody, I like to give them scenarios to sort of see how they would judge things. The scenario in which the person who's in charge of the hiring process for new ethics commissioner is the same person who is publicly defending the Prime Minister and the Finance Minister who are under an ethics investigation. Do you see any potential conflict of interest in the scenario I just described?
There was a balance in the selection board that I met. You mentioned most of the people who were there. There was a balance. Of course, as the candidate, I'm not responsible for how the selection board is constituted.
When you say balance, the law requires consultation with the other parties. None of the other parties were involved in the selection board process. The person who made that board is the House Leader for the government, is the same person who is publicly defending the Prime Minister and Finance Minister on an ethics investigation. She is also in charge of the process of finding a new ethics commissioner. Would that raise any conflict of interest flags for you?
What I can assure the member, Mr. Chairperson, is that if I am appointed as the ethics commissioner, I feel completely independent. I've had several positions where independence was an important trademark, and I can assure you that in making decisions and in conducting the affairs of the office, I would have complete independence of mind to the extent that. So
what we're trying to find, it's difficult to determine in such short time, is your conflict of interest compass, your ethical compass on these questions. Assurance that the investigations will continue, that have been ongoing for months, would greatly reassure me and I think a great number of Canadians. And assurance of that strong voice and independence. Hopefully I can get through another round and ask some questions about that period as Integrity Commissioner. Thank you, Chair.